Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we're taking a look at a 22 conversion kit for an R4 Galil rifle, or in this case, an LM5 Galil rifle. Now, the South African military adopted this conversion as a way to have lower cost training for soldiers. Of course, firing 22 rimfire is cheaper than firing full power 5.56. So they procured this system, which is you'll find a little bit odd once you see just how complicated and odd this 22 conversion is. It's a neat thing to look at, but I would not want to be the guy responsible for manufacturing it, procuring it, maintaining it. There was almost certainly some political intrigue involved in the adoption of this thing. So it was manufactured by a company called Thor Engineering here in South Africa, in Johannesburg, I believe, and designed by a guy named Willie Klotz, or Willie Klotz. So, without further ado, let's take a look at how this actually works. So the first thing that makes this unusual is that it's actually an open bolt firing conversion. So you have to have the rifle set to full auto to use it, and it requires a rifle with a full auto hammer at least. It doesn't actually have to be a full auto capable rifle, and this one actually isn't, but you have to have that full auto hammer. And then when you charge the handle back, it's going to stay cocked. When you pull the trigger, it drops forward, it's blowback operated, it will fire, and then immediately blow back open, ready for your next shot. The magazine is based on an original R4 magazine. You have to modify the mag a little bit. There's a screw here, and you can see the bottom of the mag sticking out the bottom there. This is actually, what they did was use magazines for the MN410B, which is a Mauser 22 rimfire rifle, and mount that inside a 10-round R4 magazine. Now, in order to take a look at this, we're going to start by removing the top cover. That is a really stiff spring. There are actually two main springs in here, and it makes it really quite stiff to get out. You know, one of the first things that a 22 kit should be is easy to install. This one totally is not. There we go. All right, so we'll pull out both of our springs. The easiest way to show this, I think, is actually to show installation. So I'm going to pull it the rest of the way out, and we'll skip to how to put it in. All right, so here's the whole kit. We have sort of a stand-in for the bolt carrier. We have a bolt. We have a chamber insert. That's obviously necessary to convert a 223 chamber to 22 rimfire. This is like the locking piece that holds the chamber insert in place. And we have a new additional recoil spring. So I mentioned this fires from an open bolt, and in order to do that, instead of a firing pin, it has this ridge running all the way up and down the front of the bolt face. Very similar actually to the French Javelot, or Javarm 22 rimfire sporting rifles. Same thing. So this is going to cause an indent, a crease across the entire back of the shell, which means it's actually striking the rim in two separate places. So that is going to make it very unlikely to have a misfire. But that's the bolt. Then the bolt slides into the bolt carrier like this, and we have a sear back here. So the surface right there is the sear, or is the sear engagement surface. The sear itself is this piece on the bolt carrier. So when the bolt opens up, it comes back to here, and then that little notch engages with this. When you fire, this gets lifted up, and then the second recoil spring, that little one, is pushing in here. As soon as this lifts up, the bolt goes forward and fires, and then it's going to cycle back and catch there. The way the firing system actually works is this leg is pushed down by the front of the AK, or the R4 sear. When this pushes down, you can see it's pushing on this little piece up there, and that lifts the sear just enough to fire it. It then pops backward and acts as a disconnector as well. So fires, and semi-auto only. So inside the original AK receiver, the R4 receiver, when I pull the trigger, nothing happens. And the reason for that is that the gun is set to full auto, and it has some of the full auto parts inside. In regular operation, in full auto, you're going to hold the trigger down, but you don't want the bolt to just follow or you don't want the hammer to just follow the bolt home. So there's an auto trip, which is a lever up here. Normally what happens is you hold the trigger, and when the bolt goes forward, it hits that trip once it's in battery, and then the hammer is released automatically. Well, the 22 conversion bolt does not have anything to engage that full auto trip, that release. So the hammer is permanently held in the downward position. That's important because you don't want the hammer trying to fly up into the semi-auto conversion. It's got its own firing system. It doesn't use the hammer. However, it does use the sear. So this part that I'm touching right there, when I pull the trigger, it goes forward. In the 22 kit, it's that piece going forward that pushes on this lever, which lifts the sear and allows the 22 kit to fire. So that's what's actually technically firing the gun. It's the sear going forward pushes on this. Now, in order to install this kit, we're going to start with the chamber adapter, which goes in here, kind of at, oops, sorry, goes in this way. By the way, it's got the ejector on it right there. So this goes in there. It then pivots into place there, but it's loose. And that's why we need this piece. This guy kind of sits in the receiver here. We're going to push it forward and snap it into place. So it's a little spring-loaded detent in that hole. That holds it and the chamber adapter in place. Now we can take the bolt assembly. We want the bolt forward, and you have to have this assembly up out of the receiver. Drop it in back here like that. And then we can push this forward. This is going to go into the gas tube. And then in order to make sure that the little firing piece on this is actually in front of the original R4 sear, we're going to lift this out of the way, push the bolt carrier all the way forward. That ensures that this piece is dropped down. Then we can pull it back, snap that into place, and this holds the bolt carrier in the correct position. So we've got that now. In fact, we can see this. When I pull the bolt handle back, the sear drops down, locks it in place until I pull the trigger, in which case it still doesn't work because this has come loose. There we go. Now when I pull the trigger, the bolt is able to drop. So that's how that's going to function. We can then take this recoil spring, which is going to go in and push on the bolt. The primary original recoil spring goes into the bolt carrier, and its job is just to hold the bolt carrier in place so that it doesn't move. And then the new spring nests inside the old like that. We can push that in. Oh, that is really actually remarkably stiff because there's two springs in there. So once we've got it locked in place, then we put the top cover on and you're good to go. And there we are. So let's go ahead and take it out to the range and see if it actually works. It does work, and the trigger pull is not bad. Because the mass of this bolt is so low, you'd never really know it was specifically an open bolt system. That actually seems to work just fine. It's just a really complicated system overall to manufacture and to install, and it doesn't really replicate the handling of a proper R4 or R5 rifle. Well, there you have it. This is one of the stranger and most complex 22 conversion kits I've ever seen for a semi-automatic rifle like this. This is the perfect contrast to this is actually to see the 22 conversion kit for the R4 that was designed by Tony Neophytou, because it's exactly on the other end of the spectrum. It uses all of the rifle's original functions, the safety functions as it should. The original trigger is the trigger that fires the gun. It's hammer fired, so you actually get practice with the actual trigger press of the rifle, the actual handling. The bolt handle is the same. Neophytou's design is really cool in every way that this is really frightening from a practical perspective. So anyway, if we haven't published the video on Tony Neophytou's design, we will shortly, and you should definitely stay tuned and check that one out too. Thanks for watching.